Dear Mr. Yearwood, dear Professor Eberle, dear Mrs. Trionfi, dear delegates, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hamburg. It is a great pleasure for us to be hosting the IPI World Congress, which brings together publishers, editors-in-chief, and seasoned journalists from all over the world. As a venue for discussing the role of the media in a modern democracy, Hamburg is an excellent choice. The International Press Institute is the oldest organization working to strengthen press freedom and to support persecuted journalists. As such, the annual conferences always also serve to recognize the achievements of brave journalists. Many of them put their lives at risk, are threatened or jailed simply for doing their job. As I see it, the fact that the International Press Institute is meeting in democratic Germany this time challenges us to support these brave people and not stand idly by while journalists in other countries are threatened. Journalists also face threats in countries where people vote. It goes without saying that the liberal democracy is defined not only by the principle of majority rule, but also by the extent to which it protects minorities and regards the rights of journalists to criticize the government as self-evident. The democratic principle of antagonistic cooperation is thus absolutely central. Politicians and journalists view one another critically, like people searching for the truth from different perspectives, akin to the conjectures and refutations in science. The mutual acceptance of politicians and the media in their different roles is a cornerstone of democracy. Politicians and journalists, like incidentally many NGOs and artists, value criticism as a constructive force of checks and balances. To value the free press, one must internalize democracy. In dictatorships, the press serves as an acclamation and propaganda machine. For autocrats, there are only two kinds of people: those who agree with them and enemies. Efforts to limit press freedom and impede the work of journalists therefore always indicate a turning away from democratic modes of governing. Such states therefore always stand in the focus of the work of the IPI. One of the countries in which the situation is currently escalating dramatically is Turkey. The news reports are alarming to say the least. Editorial offices are being shut down, journalists arrested, among them Dennis Gürsel, a correspondent for the daily newspaper Die Welt. He has been in jail for the past 3 months. His ability to communicate with the outside world is extremely limited. The federal president has clearly formulated Germany's demand to the Turkish government: respect the rule of law and the freedom of the media and journalists, and release Dennis Yücel. In the meantime, we have learned that yet another German citizen who works as a journalist, Mesale Tolu, has been arrested. And they are not alone. Currently, 165 journalists are being held in Turkish prisons, more than in any other country in the world. Worldwide, hundreds of journalists, media assistants, citizen journalists, and online activists are behind bars. For most European states, the road to democracy and press freedom was arduous and marked by terrible setbacks. This is especially true for Germany. You will recall that one of the first steps taken by the Nazis was to systematically bring the media into line with National Socialist politics and ideology. By international standards, Germany today is one of the countries in which the freedoms of opinion and of the press are most solidly protected. We have a journalistic and media culture that performs on the highest level. Within this landscape, Hamburg is not merely one of the most important media centers in Germany. The largest publishing houses of the free press are also located here. And it was here that the work of building a post-war German public broadcasting system modeled on the BBC began. Hamburg was also the scene of a conflict that would leave a lasting impression on press freedom in Germany. In October 1962, then Federal Defense Minister Franz Josef Strauß ordered that the offices of the Hamburg news magazine Der Spiegel be searched. The publisher Rudolf Augstein, whom you all know as the recipient of a Hero of World Press Freedom Award in 2000, was arrested together with the head of the publishing house, the editor-in-chief, and other editors. The charges were betraying state secrets and collaborating with foreign powers. This incident shows that conflicts over what journalists are allowed to do also take place in democratic states. Issues such as protecting sources, personality rights, or dealing with secrets are regularly the topic of public debate. What is key is that in a democracy with civil liberties and the principle of freedom of opinion, the state of law provides a framework for these conflicts. And so it was with Der Spiegel, which incidentally just celebrated its 70th anniversary a few months ago. The magazine took the case to the Federal Constitutional Court. While the court did not decide in its favor, the publication nevertheless succeeded in fundamentally strengthening journalism. The highest German court, the Federal Constitutional Court, ruled that a critical press enjoys constitutional status and that the state has a duty to ward off threats to a free press. With the digitalization of the media and the changed working conditions of journalists, the task of warding off threats to a free press is beset by new challenges. In Europe and North America, we observe the creeping erosion of an informed public. Ignorance of the nature of democratic institutions is spreading. They are despised and their achievements are denied. Efforts at objectivity are systematically subverted. In many quarters, not only on the radical fringes of society, but also among intellectuals, the truth is regarded as the invention of a liar. Both the ability and the will to distinguish between truth and falsehood is of central importance for the German public sphere. That is what makes the tendency of some governments to accuse serious news media outlets of purveying fake news so disturbing. We have experienced how false information is deployed by politicians and the tabloid media to bring about profound political change. Xenophobia and populism have percolated through the highest offices of democratic states. As social media and new technologies have played a big role in this process, they are bearing the brunt of the criticism. They appear to be responsible for encouraging the trend toward populism, anti-democratic views, and a turning away from facts. However, one must not forget that the traditional media are also capable of spreading hate speech and propaganda. One need only think of the low-cost Volksempfänger radios in Nazi Germany or the role of the Thousand Hills radio and television station in Rwanda. And we mustn't forget the positive achievements of the new forms of communication. Social media platforms such as Facebook and Twitter have enabled a large section of the population to express their views in public, something which public access radio and television stations failed to achieve. And many online discussions take place on a high level. Digitally, the world of science has become even more interconnected, and new self-publishing tools such as blogs have emerged. There are three central points of orientation: Any proposal for a sensible digital media policy must focus on the defense of civil liberties. Any such proposal must safeguard the impressive diversity and performance capacity of the traditional news media, while at the same time taking advantage of the possibilities that digitalization can bring to a democratic public. And there must be a market that supports the basic principle of media diversity and recognizes the achievements of journalists. Firstly, the services of search engines, social networks, platforms, and news portals as intermediaries are indispensable. How well they perform this function is evidenced by their millions of daily active users and by the great economic success they have enjoyed. However, the new digital intermediaries' prioritization of individual relevance stands in contradiction to the heretofore familiar and self-evident orientation of the media towards public relevance. With this great market power, we need mechanisms to create far more transparency. At the same time, we must respond to dangerous developments such as social bots, targeting disinformation campaigns and hate speech with appropriate regulations and without restricting freedom of opinion. Secondly, the democratic public must enable and safeguard the creation and distribution of creative and journalist products. Among the changes that are being viewed with concern are the increasing economic challenges facing traditional media. Over the past 10 years, we have witnessed newspapers in Western countries losing subscribers and advertisers. At the same time, aggregators have built a business model upon utilizing their content. This is practical for the user, but also problematic for the public sphere. For what is at stake is the aspirational aim of the media, the principle of mixing enlightenment with business. Thirdly, we must therefore safeguard the journalistic production and editorial selection of content and do so across the media spectrum. And at the same time, we must take advantage of the technical possibilities for ensuring maximum reach and relevance. To maintain this balance, the interests of copyright holders, users, producers, broadcasting companies, and cultural institutions must also be defended. A free society, therefore, needs media that it can trust. It needs media that check, summarize, and present facts in a comprehensible manner. And it needs a culture in which truth matters, and not one in which objective reality is questioned. A welcome opposition movement has arisen to oppose the tendency to deny facts. "I can't believe I'm marching for facts," read one of the placards at the March for Science, an unprecedented movement in 600 cities that drew tens of thousands of demonstrators. A similar refocusing on facts and objective reporting can also now be seen in journalism, for example in the editorial offices of the BBC, where new fact-checking teams are being assembled to debunk fake news stories. Fact-checking is expensive and hard, but therein lies the great achievement of journalists. That readers also increasingly appreciate this is testified to by the rising number of subscribers to, for example, the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. What is also indispensable is the preparation, representation, and interpretation of data. Data journalism is becoming more and more important. Here, the large publishing houses need to take the lead. Recently, a data analysis by the Süddeutsche Zeitung in Germany showed how widespread the use of German news media on the internet is. An analysis of the likes of Facebook users revealed dense spiderweb-like connections between different milieus. Supporters of various parties refer to nearly the same traditional media sources. Only the right-wing populist scene has disengaged itself from them. Thus, one cannot say that using social media creates echo chambers. Rather, social media simply makes their existence more visible. The task ahead of us, the democratic shaping of the public sphere on the internet, is not a simple one. Perhaps it is some consolation that the history of the media has always been accompanied by enormous skepticism, and yet it has still been possible to harness its potential as a tool of enlightenment. I'm reminded of Bertolt Brecht, who in 1927 stated that as far as radio was concerned, he had the horrible impression that it was an inconceivably old device. It was suddenly possible to say everything to everybody, but thinking about it, there was nothing to say. Or take Pierre Bourdieu, who characterized television as a great danger. The medium, he wrote, enjoys a de facto monopoly on what goes into the heads of a significant part of the population and what they think, effectively dividing them from individuals in a position to read so-called serious and international newspapers. Bourdieu would eventually deliver this lecture on television so that his thesis might be able to reach a wider audience. Brecht incidentally advised the directors of radio broadcasting organizations to transform the medium from an apparatus of distribution to an apparatus of communication. A medium that knew how to let the listener speak as well as hear, how to bring him into a relationship instead of isolating him, would be the finest possible communication apparatus in public life. Today, we have an apparatus of communication that also turns listeners into broadcasters and links people together. That the initial euphoria should have been followed by a phase of sobriety is understandable. The immune system of the open society is under threat. More than ever before, the democratic public needs good journalism on a national and international level. The answer to free users and opinions about fake news on the internet must be an improvement in quality in both the tabloid and the serious news sector. The press must make an effort to research information as thoroughly as possible and not simply pick and choose the facts that support their point of view. That you can get for free on the internet already. Readers and consumers of media must not be given the feeling that they have to do their own research in order to be fully informed. Let's not forget, most citizens can only afford to buy one newspaper. To have media that report accurately is always indispensable and is as important as the ability to think sensibly. I thank all journalists who pursue this task with courage and perseverance. Democracy needs you, and may the facts be with you.
Sehr geehrter Herr Erster Bürgermeister Scholz, my special thanks go to you and Senator Brosta for your support in preparing the IPI World Congress here in Hamburg, and I must add, for your substantial speech we just have heard. Thanks for the invitation to this impressive town hall with its great history, for the reception after the opening ceremony, and for the organizational support we got from the kind members of your staff. Dear IPI World Congress participants, dear IPI members and friends, I also extend to you a warm welcome to Hamburg. This open-minded and media-oriented city is the perfect place to hold the IPI World Congress 2017. Congratulations to the IPI Executive Board for this excellent choice. The last time that IPI World Congress was held in Germany was in June 1989 in Berlin, on the eve of German reunification. Perestroika had brought reforms to the Soviet Union and the countries of Eastern Europe. There was a growing hope for a better world of stable democracies based on free press and independent media. Today, nearly 20 years later, we must acknowledge that our hopes have only partially been fulfilled. Press freedom in a number of Eastern European and former Soviet states is under threat. The prosecution and jailing of journalists in Turkey seems to have no end. Moreover, new and dangerous developments are undermining the important and significant role that traditional media play in democratic systems. Social media, such as Facebook, distort the plurality of information using filters based on hidden preferences. Fake or alternative news are being used to manipulate public opinion. At the same time, traditional print and television media and their journalists are being insulted, attacked, and even declared enemies of the people. What can we do to strengthen press freedom and media freedom in view of these dangers? How can we restore the media's role in building inclusive societies and fostering democracy? I hope that this IPI World Congress will give us some answers to these urgent questions. John Yearwood, chair of IPI's Executive Board, yesterday was in Berlin for talks with the office of Steffen Seibert, who is the spokesperson of Chancellor Angela Merkel. There he got a message of welcome by Professor Monika Grütters, Minister of State and member of the German Bundestag for the World Congress of the International Press Institute. And if you allow, I will read it now to you. Prison walls may prevent the dissemination of the truth. Weapons may silence critics, and censorship and threats may work. But still it is worthwhile and essential to fight for the freedom of the press. In many countries, the freedom of the press is restricted to drive unwanted opinions from public discourse. Worldwide, journalists are prevented from doing their work. They are persecuted, imprisoned, and even killed. Politicians disparage journalists as enemies of the people. All this shows that those in power know how powerful free media words and images are. They admit that journalists' diversity is stronger than populists' simple-mindedness, and that words have a stronger impact than authoritarian force as long as the freedom of the press and journalists' ethics set the tone. For this reason, we cannot stand by and watch close allies riding roughshod over democratic fundamental rights, restricting the freedom of the press and sounding the death knell of freedom of expression and thus of democracy. Courageous journalists who risk their personal freedom and in many cases even their lives in the fight for democracy deserve all the support we can give them. Against this backdrop, I wish the World Congress of the International Press Institute every success and promise that Germany's federal government will continue to firmly support the freedom of the press and the releases of imprisoned journalists worldwide. Monika Grütters. The IPI World Congress, Hamburg 2017, hosted by the German IPI National Committee, would not have been possible without the substantial support of our partners. My special thanks go to the German public broadcasting networks ZDF and ARD, as well as Deutsche Welle. Many thanks as well for the support from publishers, including Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, FAZ, Gruner und Jahr, Heinrich Bauer Verlag, Die Zeit, and Axel Springer SE. Further thanks go to Google, Deutsche Presseagentur dpa, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, Direktorenkonferenz der Landesmedienanstalten, the German Foreign Ministry, the EU Agency for Fundamental Rights, and Al-Arabi. I'm very glad that this Congress has become a reality thanks to the common effort of some of the most important players in the German media scene. Please give them a round of applause. And now it is a great pleasure for me to introduce IPI Executive Director Barbara Trionfi. Barbara and her staff did a great job of organizing this Congress. Barbara, the floor is yours.
Mr. First Mayor, IPI members, IPI Congress delegates, and dear guests, there is an important detail that Carl-Eugen has failed to mention. This Congress would not have happened had it not been for his incredible engagement, hard work, passion, and dedication. Thank you so much, Carl-Eugen. This is the most spectacular gift you could have given to the IPI. And like most good ideas, especially those that have to do with journalism, the Hamburg Congress was born on a late evening in front of some glasses of wine, when, with a group of longtime IPI members, we were discussing our visions for the 2017 World Congress. We felt that the news media was entering difficult times globally, times when independent journalism is undermined alongside the very values that support it. And as the journalism that IPI has been promoting and supporting for 67 years has come under even greater attack today as part of the anti-liberal trends we are observing, we felt IPI needed to be louder and more visible than ever. Those conversations that for so many years IPI has been having with its members at the annual World Congress, the conversations about our shared values, about the way we believe our journalistic coverage will eventually change the societies we live in for the better, about the obstacles journalism practitioners face in striving to promote the public interest. We felt these conversations needed to be opened up to include also our audiences, and that our ideas, fears, and aspirations needed to be shared with those who consume and support the journalism that we strive to defend. And we felt that this was the right time to move the IPI Congress out of some Congress room and bring it to the center of town, where people can listen and participate. If journalism is to serve a public interest, then it belongs at the center of the public discourse. For this, I would like to thank you, Mr. Mayor, and the Senate of Hamburg for opening the doors of this impressive building, your City Hall, to the IPI, and so help IPI fulfill its vision. It is in this place, rich of history and ideals, at the center of a city known for being open to the world, that we are welcoming some of the world's most respected editors and journalists, united by one common belief, that public interest journalism is a core pillar of the societies we want to live in. And if these are the times in which we need to stand up for it, we will. Today and in the next 2 days, we will discuss the challenges and the obstacles that journalism faces, the struggle for quality and independence, which for many has become a struggle for survival, and the need for solidarity with journalists persecuted anywhere. IPI has long counted among its network some incredibly courageous journalists, and some of them will be recognized with awards later today. But there is one of these brave journalists whom I am personally missing tonight, because if he weren't in prison, he would be sitting here in the first row together with his fellow IPI Executive Board members. Kadri Gürsel has been held in Silivri prison in Istanbul since early November. It is 200 days today. He's one of more than 160 journalists and media workers in prison in Turkey today. And like Kadri, many are jailed on absurd accusations of support of terrorism, often based on their news coverage or criticism of a government. And like Kadri, they are subject to arbitrary restrictions intended to isolate them and send a chilling message to those who would dissent or criticize the regime or seek basic government accountability. We stand behind Kadri and others, like IPI members Murat Sabuncu and Ahmet Şık, and every other journalist behind bars in Turkey for his or her work. We ask Kadri's wife, Nazire, to join us tonight in his absence. And I would like to invite her to say a few words on Kadri's behalf. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Thank you all.
Hi. Our beloved IPI friends and dear people of Hamburg and Mr. Mayer. I have been to Hamburg, which is the most beautiful city in Europe, many times before, but this one is quite different than the others. I could have never even thought of that. I would be speaking to you like this and giving messages to you from Kadri, who is jailed in Silivri. Unfortunately, today, it is the 200th day of Kadri's and other Cumhuriyet journalists and executives getting arrested in the hell of Silivri. I wonder if any of you could imagine that Kadri and his friends were arrested unlawfully without any proof on the 31st of October in the morning at 7 o'clock through an immediate operation in an hour. The ones who arrested him and others in 1 hour haven't even invited them to the court yet. They haven't been given the right of defending themselves. We, as the wives of jailed Cumhuriyet journalists, remember the 100th day of their getting arrested. We went to Ankara, to the parliament, to make our voice to be heard. And we just couldn't believe that they had been arrested for 100th day. And our son, Erdem, was with us as he is today. Erdem asked me a question 4 days ago. Ma'am, we went to the parliament on the 100th day. What are we going to do on the 200th day for my father and his friends? I suddenly felt a terrible pain in my heart when my son asked an unexpected question like that. I don't think neither history nor me will ever forgive the system that causes a 10-year-old child ask such a hopeless question. I hope this historical mistake will end soon and not only imprisoned Cumhuriyet journalists but also the other journalists in Turkey will reunite with their wives, with their children, and they will get back to their work. Now, I would like to read to you Kadri's message from Silivri. Distinguished participants of the IPI World Congress, dear IPI members, my valuable friends of the IPI Board of Secretariat. I salute you from the 9th block of Silivri prison in Istanbul. We were arrested at the beginning of November with 8 columnists and administrators of Daily Cumhuriyet with an absurd charge of aiding PKK and FETÖ terror organizations without being their member. Hence, unfortunately, I could not participate in this year's IPI World Congress. I am sad that I am not among you now. I know that the real crime that I committed was criticizing the Turkish government's domestic and foreign policies, as well as its oppressive practices strongly and efficiently. Journalism in Turkey has been criminalized once again with the arrest of myself and my friends, in a move to intimidate the journalists who still dare to remain independent and critical. We have been silenced and isolated through expanded powers that the government has occupied itself by declaring a state of emergency. It's banned for us to send or receive letters. Even visits and conversations with our lawyers are restricted. Therefore, I thank you for giving my wife Nazire Gürsel the opportunity to bring my message to you. Dear Stephen, me and other arrested colleagues in my cell were very moved when we read your letter addressed to more than 150 arrested journalists in Turkey titled "You are neither alone nor forgotten" and published by Cumhuriyet on my 3rd World Press Freedom Day. We all thank you. Dear Barbara, dear John, I thank you very much for the letters that you write me in the first days of my arrest, which gave me the strength to resist all kinds of injustice. If I would not be released in the coming weeks or months, it would be 9 months since the first day of my arrest when I will find the opportunity to defend myself in front of a judge for the first time. In reality, when the indictment, which is full of baseless accusations but empty of any evidence, was first presented, I have been under arrest for approximately 6 months. As such, me and my colleagues are being punished with his prolonged arrest. That's why, although the date of our first hearing has been set, we are being kept behind bars without due process. Hence, I thank very much to the IPI for its worldwide struggle for the release of all jailed journalists, including those who work for Cumhuriyet, and voice my conviction that the IPI's World Congress would strongly call out for the release of all journalists in Turkey. I wish success for the IPI World Congress and the IPI board. I have no doubt that one day we will see each other again. Kadri, Gürsel. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nazire. Just 2 days after Kadri was arrested, I flew to Istanbul to meet his colleagues, and I also met Nazire, and I met an extraordinarily strong woman, a woman of real profound grace, a woman that you've just met this evening. Thank you. Thank you. And Kadri is extremely lucky to have you at his side. I also went to Cumhuriyet to meet some of his colleagues. I spoke to them. I told them how IPI members around the world were speaking out on his behalf. After the conversation with the staff members, one of the newspaper's most prominent columnists came up to me. She said, "Thank you for coming all this way. Thank you for telling us something that we didn't know, that the world is aware of what's happening here in Turkey." And she says, "You know what? Over the last few days, my colleagues have cried, and I have told them that I cannot cry because I need to be strong for all of you." And she says, after listening to you and bringing that message that IPI members around the world were on our side, she says to me, "Thank you for now giving me the permission to cry." And I thank all of the IPI members, wherever you are, for everything that you've done on behalf of Kadri and the more than 160 journalists being arrested and who are incarcerated unjustly in Turkey. Now we'll move on to the second part of our program, which is a town hall. But before we do that, as we were talking about Kadri, I'd like you to open your program, and in the center, there is a big poster that says, "Free Turkey Journalists." I went to Istanbul to stand up for journalism, to stand up for Kadri and his colleagues. Please join me in standing up for Turkey journalists. Thank you all very, very much.